mental health isn't a moral failing, it's a part of life. We have a mental health problem in society. More than anything, we need more mental health professionals, and I want to be one of those mental health professionals to fill that gap.
From the campus of Our Lady's University, this is For Good, Stories from Notre Dame, a behind-the-scenes glimpse into life under the Golden Dome and the powerful stories that drive Notre Dame to become a force for good in the world. Hello and welcome to For Good, Stories from Notre Dame. Our guest today is Austin Wyman, a 2023 graduate of Notre Dame and current Ph.D. student in psychology. Austin's research explores how data science and technology can improve mental health care, work that is deeply personal to him. He's with us today to share a bit of his Notre Dame journey and the passion that drives his academic pursuits. Austin, thanks so much for being with us today. And let's start out. Why is the pursuit of your education, both undergrad and now PhD in the area of psychology, to combat the mental health pandemic that we're confronting, why is this deeply personal to you? Can you tell us a little bit of your own personal story?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So my mental health journey goes back to about 2005. My Uncle Jeremy was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and it came as a big shock to the whole family. And within a short period of time, he went from being a healthy, happy individual to being engaged in a difficult conflict between himself and my grandfather, which unfortunately resulted in both of their deaths. And their deaths are something that really shaped my family over the next 20 years now. How they think about mental health, how they think about sort of the help that they gave him over his lifetime, the amount of resources that he was exposed to, and what could have been done differently. And as I grew up and learned to meditate on the conflict, I came to a different conclusion from them, that this all could have been avoided if there was more mental health support in society. Mm-hmm. Because the day before the incident happened, my uncle called a psychiatrist and said, "I don't feel well, something is wrong, I need to see someone immediately." And they dismissed his concerns because there was a lack of psychiatrists in the area and there was no one that could see him sooner.
Right.
The closest appointment he could have is 2 weeks later. Mm-hmm. But just the very morning, 2 people died that didn't need to die.
So he had a psychotic episode, I guess, in the home, and your grandfather, and trying to mediate it, it led to this confrontation and both of their deaths.
Correct. So
you were a young boy at the time, and your grandfather was like a father figure to you, and you were also very close to your uncle. How difficult is it all these years later to tell that story, to think about that story? Does it summon up all of those emotions each time, or is it therapeutic for you to talk about it, or some combination of both?
It was very difficult at first when I was in high school, trying to learn about mental health and about mental illness, and having to tie mental illness to myself with this sort of banner of shame, knowing that I'm related to it. And I think that's sort of the attitude that the rest of my family had too, as I was constantly told growing up not to talk about situations like this. Mm-hmm. But the more I talked about it, the more I understood that mental health isn't a moral failing, it's a part of life. Mm-hmm. Everyone deals with mental health, and it's important to discuss mental health. And so I started this journey by talking about it through speech and debate. I participated in original oratory, and I wrote speeches about mental health. And through
this
my
is in your
story,
high school, during high school, yeah,
high school, through my junior year and through my senior year, talking about my uncle's story and using it as a way to show, hey, we have a mental health problem in society. Mm-hmm. More than anything, we need more mental health professionals. And I want to be one of those mental health professionals to fill that gap.
Yeah.
So I did that in high school. I continued to do that when I arrived at Notre Dame, joining multiple advocacy organizations such as Active Minds, working with the McDonald Center for Student Wellbeing, working behind the scenes to do advocacy work with University Counseling Center, as well as some other organizations outside the university, such as the National Alliance on Mental Illness, Clubhouse International, and the Mental Health Literacy Collaborative.
Yeah.
I've sort of worked through these issues so many times through so many different speeches that the growing pains from them are gone. And all that's left is the therapeutic benefit of seeing people benefited by words.
By speaking out.
Right.
You know, I want to thank you for your courage, especially as a young high school student, for the traumatic events that you went through. Because you use the term banner of shame, there is such a stigma still associated for so many with mental health issues. And really, it's hard to find a family in America that hasn't suffered through some level of mental health dynamic crises within the family. But I ran a homeless center for many years, and it seems like the addictions movement is ahead of the mental health movement, even though the two are so closely related. And that when you go to like a 12-step meeting, you'll say, "Hi, I'm Lou, and I'm an alcoholic," or "I'm a drug." But rarely would we ever say, "I'm Lou, I suffer from paranoid schizophrenia," or bipolar disorder, or whatever it might be. There is still such a stigma, and it spurs fear in people or shame in people. So you have been out there at a young age telling your story, and now pursuing an education so that you can be ultimately part of the solution. How did you also did last football season a What Would You Fight For commercial, a spot where you were featured, and your story now goes out to millions of people. What was the reaction? What was the fallout for you? Did you get a lot of feedback from that level of visibility?
I did get a lot of feedback, and that was something that really surprised me. I think within a few days of the commercial airing, I received emails from dozens of people, both at the university or outside the university, that felt touched by what I had to say, that shared the personal experiences and said, "I have been so ashamed to talk about this. This happened with my family X amount of time ago. And hearing you say what you'd said about your uncle gave me the courage to talk about it some more. So thank you." And even in person, I remember there was one time I was just walking into the Morris Inn and someone stopped me and said, "Are you Austin Wyman?" And I said, "Yes."
Yeah.
And she was like, I saw your commercial, and I just want to say my family had the same thing that we experienced, and you're so powerful for being willing to share this. Thank you so much. We really needed to hear that.
Yeah. Wow. That's powerful. And that's obviously reinforcing. They must have noticed you from that great hair. I want you to know, like when I was in high school, I had hair, that was out there like that. So I'm feeling a little more youthful today, just talking with you about things. So, all right, so in all seriousness, why then did you choose, you come from New Orleans, just a great city, a lot of spice in that city, people different than I think much of the rest of the country. How and why did you come to Notre Dame? And we probably understand now why you wanted to study psychology, but why Notre Dame?
Well, I went to a Holy Cross school, so it was founded by the same people as Notre Dame. I believe it was founded in 1849, and Notre Dame was 1842, so really not far apart at all.
Yeah.
And because of that, a lot of our school culture was shaped by Notre Dame. We had so many common traditions, like the alma mater was practically the same. We have our own version of the huddle, which is where we had our cafeteria. Colors are the same thing.
Yeah.
The logos, it's small stuff like that. But I grew up knowing about Notre Dame through that exposure, because I went to school from 5th grade to 12th grade. And so being exposed to that my entire life and sort of learning what it is to be a man through that school, I wanted to continue the development of that identity through college. And that's something I looked for to sort of further that culture. And so Notre Dame was a obvious choice in that sense.
Yeah.
But you say to study psychology, I actually didn't intend to study psychology when I first came to Notre Dame. specifically the incident with my uncle related to psychiatry. And so I told myself when I was at high school that the medicine route through psychiatry was going to be the way that I was going to address this mental health crisis in society. Yeah. But when I first got to Notre Dame during my first semester, I realized I really wasn't all that interested in the biomedical classes. Wasn't interested in biology, wasn't that interested in chemistry. Really what captured my interest was the philosophy behind psychology, the way scientific experiments were conducted within the field of psychology. And I quickly switched to psychology as my major and continued down that route consistently for the rest of undergrad.
Oh, that's fascinating. So that conversion happened when you're here as a student. Tell us a little bit about your 4 years. You come here, one semester under your belt, and then COVID hits. And so during COVID, my experience was it brought out all kinds of additional stressors for people, and mental health cases over the next few years, increased dramatically. So you're here, Notre Dame, trying to kind of deal with COVID and at the same time trying to study an issue which seems to be expanding as a crisis, by the day. What was formative in your 4 years here at Notre Dame, and how hard was it?
It was definitely challenging. But I think it put me in a unique position to have the career trajectory that I did because I came in to Notre Dame wanting to be a mental health advocate. And I was given the best opportunity possible to be a mental health advocate because when COVID hit the country, people were talking about mental health like they never were talking about it before. And certainly I was doing a little bit of advocacy work before COVID started, but afterwards, a lot more people were listening. A lot more people were receptive to the message that I was trying to give, both students on campus, people outside of campus, and administrators on campus. I think I was able to pursue a lot of really impactful initiatives with regard to mental health because administrators were in tune to what was going on in the culture of Notre Dame and were willing to look to non-traditional sources for answers.
And so you finish up your degree at Notre Dame, and you have multiple options, Ph.D. programs at a number of great institutions. How and why did you choose to come back to Notre Dame into the Ph.D. program?
As you alluded to before, New Orleans is very far away from Notre Dame.
Yeah.
It's very different from Notre Dame. And that was a big challenge in adjusting. Sort of going to a new place, learning new connections. I was worried that going to another school would mean starting from scratch and having to build these connections again, learning in a very foreign place without the support that I had before. But I had built so many connections here over my 4 years that I really didn't want to leave, especially the connection that I made with my current advisor. I had been working in his lab for about a year or so, and he was incredibly supportive and even encouraging me to pursue the field of study that I'm in currently. I don't think I ever would have considered it without him, yet it seems to be a very good fit. And so his support, I knew what that was like, and I knew what to expect if I was a student. And so I decided to continue on in that way. And I definitely don't regret it for a second.
So initially you were thinking about clinical psychology for your PhD, but then you pivoted to quantitative psychology. Right. Can you explain the difference and why you chose to go the quantitative route?
Right. So for quantitative psychology, the first thing I'll say is that it isn't like a lot of the other sciences where you have physical matter. You can take something in biology, look at it and say, that's what it is. Same thing with chemistry, same thing with physics. You can't look at depression. You can't put it in a room and stare at it and say, that's depression or that's anxiety. You can't measure it directly. Measurement is what we need for making any scientific inferences about a construct. And so because of that, we have to treat it as a latent variable, something that is unobserved. And that has some different measurement challenges. So quantitative psychologists specialize in measuring latent variables and developing statistical techniques and tools to help researchers address latent variables.
I'm not sure if I understand what a latent variable is. Can you give an example?
Something like depression and anxiety, a lot of mental illnesses. Okay. You can't observe them directly, so you have to sort of tease them out into the public. So, for example, we know that depression involves symptoms of lack of motivation, lack of pleasure, low affect or low mood. So when we see all those things combined with a person, then we could say that's depression. Same thing with anxiety. It has their specific symptoms, and by noticing those symptoms, which are observable, they point towards the unobservable, which is the condition. And the same is true for all kinds of mental diagnoses.
So my experience with mental health issues is that they're often misdiagnosed. And that then oftentimes the treatment is inappropriate. And so sometimes depression is misunderstood for what is really maybe a bipolar issue. And the treatment exacerbates the problem for the patient. The treatment is not appropriate. And so is a quantitative psychologist, are you helping the clinicians to kind of get to an understanding of the disease quicker and more thoroughly? Help me understand the relationship there.
No, you're spot on. That's definitely one of the applications that quantitative psychologists work with. Quantitative psychologists work with psychology broadly. They touch a variety of different fields. They also touch education a lot of times, but my main interest usually is with clinical constructs. And so how we diagnose mental disorders is a big part of that, especially dealing with things like comorbidities. There are a lot of things that depression has in common with bipolar disorder. What is it that makes bipolar disorder unique? And how can we give those tools to a clinician so that they can more readily diagnose bipolar disorder when it comes to doing this type of work in the field? But the same is true for a variety of different disorders. And that's why I think as quantitative psychology improves, the other areas of psychology will also improve, especially clinical science. The more quantitative psychology implements cutting-edge data science techniques, such as machine learning or artificial intelligence, those benefits pass on to clinicians to make their jobs a lot easier.
It is said now that and Notre Dame reflects the norm here, that up to between a quarter and a third of all college students in America are on some type of mental health medication or are in some form of therapy. It just is rising in every level of society. Why do you think that is? Is it just that we're diagnosing things better? Is it that something is amiss in our society and it's leading to more and more mental health issues? Any causal reasons that you see?
Unfortunately, there's a variety of different causes we have to look at. It's hard to narrow it down to a specific thing, but the combination of multiple factors is what makes it so difficult to treat the issue. I think part of it is changing trends in generations when it comes to social life, how people socialize with each other, how they meet new people, how they maintain social relationships, the amount of isolation that's felt, especially since the COVID-19 pandemic.
And also online, would you say that social media adds to greater levels of isolation?
Definitely. It's definitely leading to more depression and more anxiety. Something that I think is worth pointing out, though, on the flip side, people are getting diagnosed a lot earlier than they were in previous years.
Okay.
Before, mental health was solely something you talked about in crisis. So, example with my uncle, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia when he was sort of at the peak of his disorder, when it was sort of too late to make any major lifestyle changes.
Right.
That's sort of when mental illness has been diagnosed in the past. When you see people that are on the verge of suicide or on the verge of violence or other externalizing behavior, when you have nowhere else to turn, that's when you look to the help of psychologists. Now that's not the case. Now kids are getting diagnosed earlier on, yes, but it's because they're being taken to psychologists earlier on, which honestly should give more hope.
So the early intervention is critical and leads to greater, causes for better health outcomes and more hope. Let me ask you what you've seen since your first year at Notre Dame and when you come in 2020 to now 2025. What have you seen, honestly, here at the university? We talk about Notre Dame making a much bigger commitment at the undergraduate and graduate level to being a force for good in combating this mental health crisis. At your level, have you seen change? Have you seen Notre Dame step up in a way that you think is hopeful? Or, I mean, honestly, what is your take?
I see hope in a lot of different ways. I think at the student perspective, whenever I first showed up, one of the first initiatives that I tried to tackle is the lack of diversity within the University Counseling Center. When I first got here, there were 0 Black counselors in the counseling center. And I worked extensively with them during my sophomore year to increase the number. So I believe we reached 3 Black counselors by the end of that year. I think now there's more. And that's really encouraging because more diversity really does make a difference when it comes to mental health, especially for encouraging diverse populations of students to reach out and get the help that they need, reminding them that it's okay, reminding them that there's someone that understands what they're going through like nobody else can.
Right.
And that it's encouraged for you to come seek out those resources, that you're not a burden. I think that made a big difference in my life when it came to reaching out for psychological help. And I'm so excited to see that benefit in other people's lives. I think students coming to university now, that's all they know about the counseling center. That's all they know about other mental health resources at Notre Dame. I think that's really inspiring. But I also see it from a research perspective at the graduate student level, where since I've come here, the clinical psychology program has seen a lot of major changes in how it's structured, the way it's sort of divided the program into different research areas, such as suicide, substance abuse, community health, trauma, in the way that it's given more resources to operationalize those different research interests as well with the creation of the Feldman Clinic.
Right.
And the fact that that clinic is open to the public too, meaning the greater South Bend community is able to access those benefits while grad students are training and learning and becoming the fantastic professionals that they're setting out to be. I think it's really important that fitting with Notre Dame's mission of common good, here for ourselves and here for the world, that we really see the here for the world part with the way this resource is being spread to the community.
If I could just for a second, the Veldman Psychology Center is being constructed as we speak. It's a new 3-story building right downtown by St. Joe High School that'll be on the bus line, and Notre Dame is going to go from seeing 150 patients a year through its psych programs to 1,500. So going to expand tenfold the caseload and going to be bringing research into the kind of clinical treatment modalities and being able to study their efficacy. We in it have an fMRI machine that's going to go there and that on the more serious cases will study brain waves and how patients react. And in a new a series of faculty, including a full-time clinical psychiatrist, a position that's been endowed that we're going to be able to bring into the community. So all of that, and then increasing the size of the Ph.D. program for students like you in your own testimony itself, is really, really powerful.
It's a great place to learn, and it's a great place to give back.
Yeah, fantastic. So let me ask you, what is the difference between being an undergraduate student at Notre Dame and a PhD student? Not many people have both experiences here. It's usually one or the other. You've had both. How would you describe the differences?
I say when I was an undergrad, I was a lot more involved on campus because I didn't have a car. So I would sort of understand how the campus is changing. I would see all the slight differences every day because they be something I was exposed to on my walk.
Yeah.
And I somewhat miss that. Because now when I come to campus, I just drive into Corbett and that's my day. I see the walls of Corbett and I see the parking lot and that's about it. So,
Corbett Family Hall, which is on the east side of the Notre Dame Stadium, is where the psychology department and a lot of the labs are located, correct?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
But of course, there's other differences too. As when you're more involved with student life, you're more involved with student clubs, you are able to build more student relationships. You're able to build more relationship with administrators, and some of those connections are the reason why I decided to stay, of course. Whereas now there's more of a coworker relationship with a lot of my fellow grad students.
Right.
We work towards the same projects, and that's sort of what defines our relationship is the amount of collaborations that we do. So it's less, hanging out and going to the lake together or going to the dining hall together or the library to study together, and more working together in these close-knit spaces, working on the same projects, working on the same papers, which honestly I say feels like just as much community, but slightly different.
And do you interface with the undergraduate students at all in psychology? Do they populate the labs? Do you TA for them? What interface do you have there?
Those are the two primary ways that I work with them. We have a couple of undergrads in our lab, so getting them involved with the projects and talking with them about their career aspirations. Some want to go to med school, some are going to grad school, some want to go straight into industry. Yeah. And I feel like there's enough diversity within the program that we can offer them that advice and support in the diversity of ways. Yeah. And the other way is through teaching and learning, which as a TA, you sort of get that experience that hopefully going into academia prepares you for being a better instructor, which you hope when you're an instructor to have a major impact on undergraduate students. So this just gives you extra preparation for that.
What do you think you want to do long term, Austin? What would be your dream? You're 3 years into a 5-6 year Ph.D. program right now, so you still have more research and study ahead of you. But at the end of the line, this could change, 3 different ways. But right now, what do you dream to do with this degree?
All I can say for now is that I definitely want to stay down the academic research route. But I think academic research can look so different because of quantitative psychology, because it's such a diverse field and so many people need quantitative psychology. Different quantitative psychologist positions do a lot of different things. I can be a primary quantitative psychologist, such as the quantitative psychologists that are within Notre Dame's program, where statistical method research is the primary focus of their work, and they rarely do any applied research. Or I can flip that and try to be a quantitative psychologist within a smaller psychology program where my goal is to support other psychologists in the area. So focusing on more applied research and teaching, if I did that. And then the final way, one thing I'm more considering recently, because I've had a chance to do a lot of clinical applied work, is potentially working in hospitals or centers like Development Clinic and serving as a methodologist on staff to help the type of clinical research and practice through advanced quantitative methodology.
Fascinating. So in as a quantitative psychologist, do you specialize at all in, like, my focus area is anxiety and depression, or split personality disorders, or do you have an area of focus or not?
My primary clinical interest at this point is autism research. Especially when it comes to autism diagnosis and assessment. I'm really interested in developing better methods for diagnosing autism, because I think that's a major issue with childhood care, and getting kids the access to the care they need early on is about giving them the right diagnosis.
So if you can get that diagnosis earlier, then you can have interventions that can help out with the treatment of autism? Okay. Where did that come up? Why did that become a topic of interest?
The primary reason is because I have family members with autism, and I've seen their lived experience and how difficult it is for low-income families to get diagnosed with autism.
Got it.
And because it's so challenging to get that diagnosis, it's important that when those doors open, the quality of the measure that's used to diagnose autism is high.
So you can have a real impact. Yeah. So what would you say to a viewer or listener today that this mental health crisis seems to be so big, and it can go in multiple different directions with different health issues, that I, as a non-professional, feel helpless against it. I don't know what to do. What suggestions would you give to somebody who isn't a professional, that they could make a difference, be a mental health advocate in some way?
I would say don't try to fix a crisis, because you're not a mental health professional. Only a mental health professional is equipped to deal with the crisis. But the reason we have this crisis is because there were warning signs leading up to it that were not observed. And such as on the onset of depression and anxiety, sort of sweeping it under the rug, not treating it as something that's important, not giving any strategies to manage it, so that the habits to manage it become more self-destructive. I mean, think about the way depression and anxiety can evolve into substance use.
Yeah.
The way that the thoughts that lead a panic disorder can eventually evolve into suicidal thoughts.
Yeah.
The sort of crisis aspect that we see with violence and aggression, externalized behavior, suicide, all these types of things that we worry about in society whenever we see headlines, that's not mental health.
Yeah.
Mental health is so much more than what we see in the news.
Yeah.
And I think one thing that is a strength of how we talk about mental health since COVID is that we're finally talking about mental health outside of crises. We talk about mental health as something that everybody has, which is something that people fighting stigma have been talking about for a long time.
Right.
You're not crazy if you have mental health. Everybody has mental health. We just deal with it in different ways.
Right.
And having that knowledge of mental health makes it easier to get help.
Yeah. And it seems that a lot of people in society self-medicate with drugs and alcohol. Many young people will calm themselves by smoking pot or using other recreational drugs. Many older, well-heeled people will come home from work and they have to have that cocktail to take the edge off on a daily basis, or drink wine to kind of like calm themselves down on a daily basis. It seems that the self-medication route of drugs and alcohol just seems to suppress the problem and have it result in something bigger down the line. Would that be a fair assessment?
That'd be a fair assessment. And so if you want to know how to address the mental health crisis, it's addressing a lot of those self-medication habits early on and asking, why am I doing this? Why do I think this is necessary? What feeling is this coming from? And of course, is there something better that I could do?
Yeah.
And offering people that you see struggling with that, this type of support and hope to move them away from the self-medication route and more towards something healthier.
And that leads to my final question today. Father Bob Dowd, our president, has declared the Notre Dame Forum, the theme for this year, as being cultivating hope. And in this era where it seems like the mental health crisis is ever expanding and growing in more visibility in the streets of America, especially the urban areas. You see people out there talking to themselves, and you see people that are homeless, and you see every family that seems to be well adjusted has some quiet mental health crisis that they're dealing with. How do you cultivate hope? Where do you see hope amidst this pandemic of mental health?
This may seem counterintuitive, but I find hope in the number of people we see talking about mental health. Because although they are struggling with mental health, the fact that they feel confident to fight against stigma, to talk about their struggles, to talk about what they're going through, and to ask for support directly, I think that's a real improvement in society, something that was scarcely seen before the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think we also have seen a huge influx of resources going to address this crisis, to address suicides, to address violence rates, and all these things that cover the headlines regarding mental health.
Yeah.
Which, if more people are focusing energy on addressing the crisis aspect of mental health, that means there's more time and energy to devote to the other parts of the mental health experience, the parts leading up to the crisis. It gives organizations like National Alliance on Mental Illness or the Mental Health Literacy Collaborative time to teach people about what mental health is and act as a preventive strategy rather than a reactive strategy. And the Mental Health Literacy Collaborative commonly uses the metaphor, what if Smokey the Bear only taught you how to put out?
Say it again?
What if Smokey the Bear only taught you how to put out fires? There'd be fires all over the place.
Right.
Instead, we're taught how to prevent fires.
Exactly.
And the exact same thing needs to happen with mental health.
Yeah.
And I think a lot more people realize that since COVID.
That's fantastic. You keep a photo in your office. Could you tell us what that photo is and why do you keep it there where you see it every day?
That photo is of my Uncle Jeremy holding me when I was 2 years old. It's the only photo I have of him, but it means a lot to me because it reminds me why I do the work that I do. So that Jeremy and my grandfather and countless other individuals that have lost their life to mental illness don't have to go through that.
Yeah.
other families don't have to experience with my family experienced.
And it goes back to the scarcity of care. And as you told that story, well, I just want to tell you, Austin, we're so proud of you, and so grateful, even more so, to have you as part of the Notre Dame family. The way you have taken the hardship in your life and converted it as a force for good, and training yourself as a mental health professional so that you can bring hope and make a difference in the lives of others, is just wonderful to see. And so thank you. And, we talk about stories of cultivating hope. I think it begins with you. So thank you for being with us today and sharing that conversation. One of the things that we don't maybe integrate enough in this mental health dynamic is the role of prayer. And I do think that for people of faith, they find a construct on how to kind of cope with the sufferings and the maladies that face us. And so as we do with all these programs, we welcome you and ask you to join us in a prayer to Our Lady, who animates this university since day one in 1842 and is as present today in all our doings. So please join with us as we say, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Thank you again, Austin. Thank you for joining us. Take care, God bless, and go Irish. And a special prayer for all those that are suffering and those that are giving care out there to somebody with a mental health issue.